Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is episode 370 with Rebecca Rusch. Rebecca Rusch is a 7-time world champion in multiple sports. She's won the Leadville 100 bike race 4 times. She's the first person ever to ride the full length of the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. We're going to talk about that today. And she won an Emmy for that film, which she produced with Red Bull. She has ridden the Iditarod mountain bike, winter snow bike race in Alaska. She's ridden that 3 times in the last 3 years. She's the first female ascent on El Capitan of the Bermuda Dunes route. She's done a first descent, riverboarding 300 miles of the Grand Canyon in winter in 18 days. Rebecca rode her bike up Mount Kilimanjaro and back down. Obviously, she said riding back down was way more fun. But she's not just a superstar athlete. She's also a best-selling author, and she's the founder of the Be Good Foundation, and she's been running cycling events for a long time, and her current event is Rebecca's Private Idaho. It's a multi-day gravel event up in her hometown of Ketchum, Idaho. And it really is just such a fantastic honor to interview someone who has explored the world in so many different ways and is in here of service to folks. And you will see all of that come through in the interview. So without further ado, here is Rebecca Rusch. Anything like on your mind in general over the last couple of weeks coming up for you?
Coming up for me. Let's see. I mean, I am planning for some big expeditions, one this summer, one next year. And probably a bit like you is morphing my business and my work, which is also my pleasure, to feel aligned with what works for me right now, but also with what the world needs and how I can share what I do. So yeah, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur and athlete for many decades, and it's always evolving. So I think, yeah, the last really few months have been thinking about, and this winter thinking about the next evolution of and building on the work that I'm doing. So yeah, getting back to my roots a little bit with some big expeditions, but then also taking that the next layer and how to bring those lessons and bring, the natural world back to people who might not go do the Iditarod Trail or might not go do the stuff I do. So it's yeah, kind of morphing that business, which was partially why I was really interested in like your tech background. And I mean, we're all learning post-pandemic or even still in the pandemic. I think for me, one priorities of what's important and how to spend our time, but then also how to connect with each other in different ways, instead of having to travel and be in person. And so it's been really cool. That aspect of technology is connecting community, even when you're not in the same space. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot, and okay. My foundation and my event registration's open. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff on the roster, but overall building the life that feels good for us. And I mean, that's exactly what your website talks about. And, I have a gift of ultra endurance, and how to take that gift and bring it back so that it serves me, but serves other people.
Okay, perfect. You've like already have a few notes here. You've already like brought up half of them at least. So this is great. Maybe we could just roll right into it. I have a place where I thought we'd start actually.
I love it. Let's do it.
Well, today is April 1st as we're recording it, and I've had a few fun prank experiences out in the wilderness or on expeditions, and I was wondering if you had any favorite pranks or April Fool's experiences that have happened, with the characters you've met around the world.
Oh, gosh, a prank. I mean, the really basic one is putting rocks in somebody's backpack and, not telling them until later. Someone maybe who's a little faster than you, slowing them down, and then you get to camp and unload your backpack, and they've been carrying an
Oh
extra
gosh,
load.
I
But that's like pretty standard.
I knew you were good. I thought you might say something like that. Just remembered back in Boy Scouts that I was probably 16, and we would do like small rocks, right, one at a time into the water bottle pockets,
Yeah.
and eventually it becomes 20 pounds of rocks. It's like, oh my god, I'm so tired today.
But
Oh.
I guess it's the benefit of that person who played the trick on you is they made you stronger. They gave you rocks to
Yeah,
carry.
jokes on them, really. 'Cause now now you're gonna get
But yeah,
fitter.
April Fools, it kind of always catches me when people are like, oh, it's April Fools. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it's fun, but like, it's not in my nature to want to try to mess with people that much, really.
I've had certain friends who really have liked to mess with people, and so when I hang around with them, it's like really fun to do that. And
Yeah.
then yesterday, my wife texted me. She's like, "Tomorrow we should." So my kids read this Dr. Seuss book called Wacky Wednesday, and it's just like a bunch of drawings of things that are out of place. But it all starts when there's a shoe on the wall, and she was like, "I think we should just put a shoe on the wall." And I was like, "Oh,
That's
that's
pretty
great."
cool.
And then I kind of went overboard. I put all my pants in his pants drawer, my 5-year old, and I switched his cereal around so that when he poured it, the different cereals came out of his cereal boxes.
Oh, I mean, that's kind of awesome. Love that playful nature. That's pretty cool. And I will say some of my best expedition partners, there's one guy, Doom, who's really fun, and he's just playful in that way. He's not going to like do anything that's vindictive, but just kind of always makes everybody laugh.
Yeah, I gosh, there's so many places to go, and you have we have a couple hours, right? You have
Yeah.
time for okay, good, because it's you've done so much in your life, and maybe speaking of expedition partners, maybe we'll start with Hu Yen, I think is her name, from the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about your relationship with her.
Well, Huen, she rode the Ho Chi Minh Trail with me. She's a Vietnamese mountain biker, cyclist, and riding the Ho Chi Minh Trail was the most important ride of my life to connect with my father and do this massive expedition through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And part of the expedition is that we were filming an Emmy award-winning film called Blood Road. And so I was paired with Huen and didn't get to meet her ahead of time. She was actually chosen and interviewed and selected by the creative director, Nicholas Shrunk. And as an experienced expedition person, I was really uncomfortable with that whole arrangement of not getting to choose my own teammate, not getting to meet my teammate. We didn't talk or meet ahead of time.
Mm.
The meeting in Blood Road in the film is me actually meeting her for the first time. And so leading into it, I was really uncomfortable with that arrangement. I wasn't happy about it. Not that I assumed she was a nice person, but doing the biggest expedition of my life, my MO is you control the controllables. You plan your gear, you plan your teammate, you plan the maps. And because we were filming and because the crew intuitively wanted authentic interactions, they kept a lot of things from me, including maps, including my teammate. And I really butted heads with them leading into it and felt, for a while, like, this is not how I plan. This is not, this is not the way I do things. And I had to really, it was probably the hardest part of the whole expedition is I had to let go of the way that I wanted to do it and realize that if we want to film this, if we want to tell a story, I have to let go of control. And that was really hard for me. And so I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure I would like Huen. I wasn't sure she'd be able to do the ride. And so I kind of went in with the backup plan of like, okay, I'm going to let go of control and we'll see how she is. And ultimately, I'll finish this expedition alone if I have to, because I was super focused that I'm going to do this ride. And I met her, and really honestly, what was my initially one of my biggest pain points of the planning and how this was all laying out became one of the biggest gifts, because she taught me about her country. She taught me about the Ho Chi Minh Trail from her side, and the Vietnam War, which they call the American War, from her side. And she didn't speak a lot of English, and she had never ridden that long before. The races that she had done were like 2 hours. She'd never set up a tent. She'd never used a hydration pack. She'd never done a multi-day expedition. And so, you know, I had to teach her a lot, which was frustrating at times, but I also, she was teaching me. And at the same time, you know, I was teaching her her physical capabilities and what she could do. And she far surpassed what I thought she was going to be able to do. And that really strengthened her confidence. And she was teaching me emotionally how to tap into my emotions and how to slow down and how to look at people in a rice field and, you know, look at all the detail of what's happening and look at a butterfly on a tree. And, you know, she was telling me the plants, and, you know, it was a really beautiful relationship. And I do feel like we became each other's teachers, her for my emotional spirit and me for her physical being. And we really were sisters at the end of it. And don't get me wrong, it was really hard, but she ended up being such a great teammate. And if I had brought my own teammate, super strong person, somebody who's already done like a million expeditions, we would have gone too fast, and we wouldn't have seen what was waiting there on the trail for me. And so I thanked her at the end, and I said, thank you for teaching me how to slow down. And as a racer and a competitive athlete, I don't slow down a lot. And so that was a real transition for me, is to take the time in the outdoors and to try to communicate with someone non-verbally who, you know, our languages, you know, I don't speak Vietnamese and she only spoke a little bit of English, but we didn't need that. And when I saw the film for the first time, the first film edit, and saw the subtitles of her interviews and what she was saying, it struck me that she completely understood me with no words, without complete language. And she was so emotionally intelligent that, she became my emotional teacher and me, her physical teacher.
Wow, that's beautiful. And you talked about slowing down, and there was this, like, in the film, which I watched recently, just a few days ago, it was like you wanted to be at your father's crash site on the day, the anniversary of the plane going down. And it was like you guys were right there, but didn't get to because you had to go through meeting the village chief. And so that's just, you know, an example for me of like the circumstances just force you to slow down and wait for the moment to come to you, in a sense.
Yeah, and it's cliche. We all say everything happens for a reason and things happen in their own time, but especially as I learned in Southeast Asia, there is a different pace. It's not the Western pace of like everything's on time, we're controlling everything. And that's has really helped me sort of with patience and waiting for something to happen. And honestly, we set this arbitrary deadline, this date to be somewhere, and we were there the next day, and it was fine and it was beautiful. And we allowed the time to meet the village chief, Mr. Air, and that extra day of layover, what it required me, what allowed me to do is write a letter to my dad that I put in the tree, and to sit still and think about what the experience, reflect on where we'd been and where we were going. And we spent a whole day of just kind of sitting around, and we hadn't done that the whole expedition. And so in hindsight, it was an absolute gift, because it allowed me to collect my thoughts, to think about why I was there, to talk to my husband, you know, and to journal and write and just stop and we got to wash our bikes and our equipment and our clothes. So that was another good thing. With weeks on the trail, you're not washing, as much as you want to be. So we were filthy. So there were a lot of gifts in slowing down and that sort of more Eastern pace and style of the rhythm of the way things move in Laos. And you've been there. I think or maybe you're there now. Where are you in the world? I don't even know.
I'm in St. Louis.
Okay,
Missouri.
you're in St. Louis.
I'm in the States. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm from Chicago area, so originally.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're in Idaho. Is that right?
Idaho. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived in Hoi An in Vietnam for a while. That was like one of the first few times I had lived outside of the US was in Vietnam. And my ex and I at the time, we rode motorbikes on the Ho Chi Minh Highway, which is not the same as the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but it's the north-south Vietnam highway that probably your support crew was on sometimes. And did you have a favorite part of the world over there that you passed through?
Oh, I mean, to me, Laos to me just felt very pristine and untouched. And it's all beautiful. The jungle's beautiful. The people are beautiful. The temples, the way of life. But I really felt like when we were in Laos, that things were relatively unchanged from when, the 70s, when my dad was there. And I really did feel like in that country, I was able to have the opportunity to ride through history and to see a place relatively undeveloped, but also, unspoiled. And many of the villages that we rode through, there are no roads to them, just a trail. And they're walking or riding bikes between villages or to get to the river. And it was an immersion in that country and far off the beaten path. And what was really cool about that is, I was no longer a tourist. I was immersed in the land, and the culture and again, no language. But I think when you travel on two wheels, it's a universally accepted mode of a traveler. And you ride into a village on two wheels and instantly people understand you're on a journey and they take you in, they smile. It's like this bike is this like icebreaker for people who've traveled all around the world, especially in Southeast Asia. I mean, there are more bikes than cars and more two-wheeled vehicles. Now more of them are motorbikes, but it was this connectivity. So Laos is definitely really dear to my heart. And I've gone back multiple times. I've taken, pre-pandemic, each year I would take a group of mountain bikers back for MTB Lao trip and take a small group on the Ho Chi Minh Trail to visit the tree, to go, through the places where all the bomb craters are. And that's part of the work of my foundation, the Be Good Foundation. And so I haven't been able to go back in a couple of years, but I'll definitely be there. I've got some village friends I need to go visit again.
That's wonderful. And there's that experience of riding into a village and having people come out to greet you. Like you ride into Chicago or St. Louis and like nobody notices, right? Yeah. You ride into a village and everyone's like, ooh, an interesting person just came to us. And it's like, they all want to meet you and you want to meet them. And it's such a special experience.
Oh, it's like, everything stops and everybody comes, and it feels like, there's 4 or 5 huts, wooden huts and houses, but you're looking and there's like a couple hundred people and you're like, where'd they all come from? You're like, wow. And lots of kids and smiles and women weaving, fabrics. And it's like this huge celebration when someone comes through the village and you sort of interact and smile and laugh and try to express where you're going, where you've come from. And then you go on your way again. And it's just this beautiful human interaction of like, hi, how are you doing? And then you go on.
Yeah.
It's really special.
You talked about the bomb craters, and there's a lot of, there were places I didn't go in Laos because of the unexploded ordnance. There's,
Yeah.
I think like 60,000 tons still or something. It could be 100 years before they can clean it up. And there's some World Heritage sites that are like, yeah, you could go, but there's bombs there. So, um,
Yeah.
and it's so weird, right? Because we're not in a war area most of the time, and then all of a sudden you go back and this war was pretty recent. Your father was in it. Like lots of my dad's friends were like, why are you going to Vietnam? Like stay away from there. What was your experience and understanding of war from being there?
Well, you're right. The biggest discovery to me that, not wasn't finding my dad, finding myself. It was actually discovering how much unexploded ordnance from a war that ended 50 years ago, how much is still there and is still killing people. I mean, it's Laos is the most heavily bombed country in the history of the world, and they technically weren't part of the Vietnam War. They were just geographically the innocent bystanders. And so finding out about all the unexploded ordnance, seeing the devastation, the bomb craters that are still there, the bombs that are still exploding, that was a huge shock to me. And I came home, one, feeling disgusted by war and the very visual presence. Like I said earlier, you're standing in history. It's different to read about it or see it on the news, but in 3 dimension to look at the earth there that looks like Swiss cheese. Literally, you have to walk on the ridges between all the bomb craters to stand in that. It really is impactful to understand history when you stand in it. And so that was a big discovery for me of how devastating and how awful and how it still continues to kill people. But on the flip side of that, and that was the genesis for starting the Be Good Foundation, is feeling like definitely my dad brought me there to show me what still exists and asked me to use my platform to do something about it. He was remorseful about having to be there. He wrote it in his letters home. He didn't like dropping bombs. And I believe that I was brought there with my career and my cycling for him to ask me to continue helping with the healing. And so that's the genesis of my foundation. But I will tell you, the flip side of that is when we talk about war, I have never met people more forgiving of the past and moving on in my whole life. I mean, if you put it into context, I was going through these villages and went to the village of Ta Oi where my dad was shot down and basically asked, can I come into your home? My dad was one of the people who was dropping bombs on you. Can I come in and will you help me find him? I mean, if you imagine if someone came to your front door and said, yeah, my family was dropping bombs here. Can I come in and will you welcome me? And always the answer was yes. How can we help you? Oh, you're here to travel. You're here to look and understand and explore. We'll help you. Hands down, everyone wanted to help me. And when you think about the history, they could have been hostile and said, no, we don't want to welcome you here. And Huyen even said that I didn't understand her words at the time, but in translation in the film, she said, the history is past and the healing begins with me and her going on a ride. The healing begins with a Vietnamese woman and an American woman going on a bike ride. And so I will say the juxtaposition of the atrocities of war and how the people in Southeast Asia are able to forgive. Both those things were very, very impactful for me, and I carry those with me now.
Yeah. I experienced I was surprised at how, welcoming the Vietnamese people were, especially, and it's I read a bunch of Vietnamese books about, there is a sadness to the culture of Vietnam, just because it's not just Americans that had their fingers in they've been invaded by the Chinese for millennia, and then the French, and then the Siamese, and then the Americans. We were all just trying to take control of their country. And besides calling it the American War, they called it, the Vietnamese Independence War, or the Unification War. Like we just want to be in charge of our own people for the first time in centuries. And I was really stirred by, like it doesn't matter how long you stay here, like we're always just gonna want this. So you can't even win a war against some people that they just want to be free and in charge of their lives.
Their history. There's a book. Have you read the book, The Mountains Sing?
Mm-mm.
That's a really good one, written by a Vietnamese woman, and it's a generational story of her grandmother who was fighting for their country, and her mother, and then her during, the Vietnam War. And it's actually, to your point, a quite stunning generational story of women, 3 women, mother, grandmother, and daughter, who all went through very similar things of just wanting to protect their home from different people.
Yeah.
And
so your foundation, what is it doing?
So my foundation is called the Be Good Foundation, and in all of my letters all of the letters that my dad wrote home from the Vietnam War, he signed them all off with the words "Be Good," and every single letter, and so those words have resonated with me, and it is quite simple, of like, what's your mission, what's your goal, and honestly, it's to be good. And so the Be Good Foundation started a few years ago and was motivated by my ride down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And the mission statement, it's to use the bicycle as a catalyst for healing, empowerment, and evolution. And so some of our projects include clearing up unexploded ordnance along the Ho Chi Minh Trail where I rode. We also work for bike infrastructure in the US, more places for people to ride, getting more people involved into cycling, who previously maybe haven't had access to cycling and the ability to enjoy the outdoors. And I started the foundation and chose those words specifically, healing, empowerment, and evolution, because that's what the bike has given me. And people always are like, oh, well, you're an athlete, you're a cyclist, and cycling is not who I am, or athlete's not who I am. It's what I do. And it's the tool that I use to grow and learn and explore and connect with people. And so that really is what the Be Good Foundation is all about, is using that tool to do good and to be good.
Have you always had a separate, like identity? I'm not an athlete. It's what I do, or at one point did you have a like, this is me, I'm the athlete, and you were intimately wrapped up in that?
Well, 2015, the ride down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, really that was a liminal ride for me, and a change in my perception. From the outside, people probably see the same thing, this athlete who's doing this crazy stuff. But on the inside, that trip really is where I did start to understand and start to ask some of those bigger life questions. Why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I going? And so, pre-Blood Road, very intense athlete. I would have said, I'm an athlete. I'm, trying to win these races. I'm doing this stuff. And I knew intuitively that it was more than that, but I wasn't able to articulate it because I hadn't slowed down and taken the time to really think about, why am I doing all these crazy things? And people would ask me the question, why? And I'd be like, well, because I love it, but now, post, riding the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the couple of years after that ride, I'm not going to lie, were actually pretty challenging for me. And I went through sort of a period of depression and introspection, and, you know, how do I top like the most important thing I've done? What does this mean? And I started journaling a lot, and I have to thank the creative director, Nicholas Shrunk, again. He forced me to voice and write every day, voice journal, and then also write in a journal. And that became part of the story of the film. And it was kind of like, oh, I've got to do this stuff every day. I'm super tired. I don't want to do it. But it was part of the deal. And so I did it. And that has carried over and really been another beautiful lesson in writing down why I'm here, what I'm doing. And so that helped me really write a mission statement for myself, for my business, for my foundation, some what I call navigational handrails for life, of like, you know, and then ultimately, you know, when I don't know what to do, I go back to be good. And so to answer your question, no, I haven't. Oh, I would have said I'm an athlete. And now I actually like to say, well, I'm an explorer. And yeah, the athletics, it's what I do, but it's not who I am. It's the tool that I use for exploration, for sharing, for doing good in the world. Just as somebody with another skill set, hopefully will use that tool. And I think we all reach a point in our life where it's less about me and more about we. And like, I have this skill set, I've done all these great things. I'm not done doing great things, but it's bigger than just me. And Blood Road really put a magnifying glass on that. I think intuitively I knew a lot of these things, but I hadn't been forced to articulate it, and I hadn't really spent the time to reflect and think about the past, which helps you move forward.
Yeah, 2015. You mentioned before we started that you know that was an important year in my life. I mean, every year is important. Yeah, an interesting turning point year for me. If I were to ask you to articulate how you serve the world, the universe, whatever it might be, what would you say?
How I serve. And this comes from, often we don't know what is our gift that we have to give the world. And so to answer your question, I'm going to use a lot of the words that other people have said to me is, oh, you're an inspiration. What you do is so amazing. You know, the places that you go, and you're a good writer, you're a good communicator. And so often we don't shine a light or really know what our skill set is. And so I've listened to other people and said, okay, well, if that's what people resonate with, I don't really understand why, but if that is special to other people, then I have a responsibility to give it back. And so I really am motivated to continue to challenge and push myself on these big expeditions, with the focus of bringing the trail and the teachings from the trail back to other people. So to take people to Alaska, to take people down the Ho Chi Minh Trail with me, in hopes that they're inspired to be outside, to move, to listen to nature, to do something really hard, or just to see a beautiful part of the world and maybe want to protect it. And so how I serve is I push myself really hard as an example, but then I bring the stories back, because the trail absolutely is my teacher. And I have this concept that I've named, that I call Dirt Dharma. And Dirt Dharma to me is when I am on the dirt, when I am on the trail, my path is really clear, and there's clarity, there's focus. I solve all the biggest problems in my head when I'm out in nature, moving on the dirt. So yeah, my mission is to push myself, but to bring that back to everybody else.
Thanks for sharing.
And do you, I find, here's what I find, and I hadn't done this either, is that not a lot of people can say, what is their personal mission statement? You know, what is their goal? And every company will have a vision statement, a mission statement, but very few humans have done that. And I've sort of gone through that exercise myself. Do you have Have you done that? Do you have a personal mission statement?
I would say it's becoming illuminated to me. Similarly, my sense is that uh, so one of the things I've learned from other people telling me is that I elevate all the projects that I'm part of. Like when I'm on a racing team, I'm usually not the one holding my arms in the air winning the race, but my team is winning, half of all the races we enter when I'm on the start line. And, if someone starts a project and then I'm part of it, like it will succeed. And so there's an amount of, how I elevate others. And I do that through coaching and organizations that I'm part of. And then this work that I'm doing, these interviews and studying, doing metaphysical experiments, doing high performance experiments. I'm really someone who processes lots and lots of information and ideas and experiences, and then distills them down to little bits that I hope will expand and shift and elevate people's consciousness and awareness.
Yeah.
So those are sort of two of the main things that I do.
I love that. One, I love that, like me, you're listening to what other people say that, your skill set is, and they're asking for more of you, elevating the team experience. But I also love that you can distill information, because we have so much information in the world right now. So being a distiller is actually a really awesome trait. I'm glad you're doing all of that.
It's fun for me. And it's, there's this point here that we understand who we are a lot of times through relationship. Like, both you and I are relying on other people to tell us who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's like in interacting with Hu Yen, who you talked about, like you were shown a part of yourself, and there's so much like you can learn a lot about yourself being solo in nature, and but then a lot of it solidifies and condenses in relationship to other people as well.
That's right.
Let's see where I want to go next. There's maybe a couple more things that I just wanted to ask you about. The Vietnam, the Southeast Asia expedition. One thing I thought was pretty rare, a rare experience, was portaging through that cave. So there's like a cave that's open on both ends with a river in it, and you spent many hours going through the dark and boating, and then carrying. Could you tell a little bit about that, because that sounds so unique?
Well, yeah, it was unique. And as you know, caves are a big part of the geography of that area. And the caves are really how many villagers survived and lived for years inside caves while the bombs were going off and the war was going on. And so it's like the land protected the people. And so there's caves everywhere. And this particular cave, was a point, instead of like a cave that you go in and come out of is what we typically think of. It was a point to point. And as I told you earlier, I didn't have all the maps of where we were going and what we were doing. And so that cave experience was really intense. I mean, I'm a paddler and I've done adventure racing and multi-sport. And so it wasn't the act of going through the cave that was that gnarly. What was really stressful for me, and you see it in the film, is that I didn't know the length of the cave. So I didn't know if it was 1 mile, 10 miles. I had no idea. And obviously GPS doesn't work inside of a very dark, wet cave. And I was also responsible for Huen. She had no paddling experience. This was really intense for her. And so I felt this was the point in the ride where I actually felt probably the highest risk factor for us, just physically, not knowing the length of the cave, which means if our battery lights go out in our headlamps, navigating through there in pitch black would have been really intense, or having, an injury or something inside the cave would have been really intense. And so it was pretty high stakes. And I felt a huge responsibility for Huan and a frustration with not knowing, where the end of the cave might be.
Did they know and just not tell you?
Yeah, they knew. They had, yeah, yeah. And so this was part of the mystery and the discovery. And yeah, what's frustrating in the moment of like, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know exactly how far it was so I could find our average speed, and could tell Huan we'll be out in 4 hours or whatever. We ended up being in that cave 9 hours. It was 13 kilometers long. So really pretty intense, high stakes situation. And we're bumping through rocks and carrying our bikes and, knowing that we're only halfway through the expedition. Also pretty high stakes of wrecking some of our equipment and breaking a piece on the bike that perhaps couldn't be repaired. And so to me, it was like, am I risking the whole entire expedition here in this really insane insane part of the terrain? And we got through. It was really brutal physically and emotionally. I think brutal physically for Huan, brutal emotionally for me. But exiting on the other side, we met some local villagers who were fishing and making fish and it provided another gift on the other side of that. And I think it really pushed her to see what she's capable of. She'd never paddled, she'd never been in a boat. But it also really hit home the intensity of people that lived in caves for years. I mean, we met a village woman who lived for 9 years inside a cave. 3 of her children were born inside the cave. And you start to think about how scared we were for being in there and how intense it was for 9 hours. Imagine living in a cave for 9 years and just coming out at night to when it's safe to get food. And just it makes my plight, that our frustration or difficulties seem really pale in comparison, obviously. And so I'm glad that we were in there, and you get a taste of like how hard life would have been to live inside a cave.
Hey friends, I want to take a quick second to tell you about a free, no-cost business training that I'll be hosting in April. This is a 3-day event, April 19th, 20th, and 21st, and I'm calling it the Quantum Entrepreneurship Series. And this is a high-level business training for coaches, healers, and spiritual entrepreneurs. And on the first day, you're going to learn the best types of businesses. Let's call them soul-aligned business models that you can use to fuel your mission, to create freedom in your life, to live from anywhere. I've been testing this myself for almost 9 years now, and I've interviewed thousands of people. And so we're going to be distilling all that information to show you the different ways that you can earn a living and be highly abundant as a spiritual entrepreneur. Day 2, we're going to talk about the best metaphysical practices. My favorite, I've done more than 50 metaphysical experiments in the last 5 years, and I've distilled those down into the ones that are most applicable for running a business. And finally, the last day is about infinite opportunity, how to build a world-class network, and understanding the different levels of abundance so you can bring those into your business and your life. So again, this is a no-cost series. You can sign up for it now. We'll have links below this episode wherever you're listening or watching on YouTube. And you can also go to DerekLaudermilk.com and sign up for free there, and it will send you emails to remind you exactly when that is. But they'll be at 12 Central on those dates, the 19th, 20th, and 21st. Thanks so much. Hope to see you there. There's a psychological piece that I'm curious about, which is when you're dealing with a challenge of unknown parameters. So like, I know you've raced and won the Leadville 100 multiple times, and it's a long event and you can sort of budget. Like, I know what it will take to finish, and you're like, okay, I can give this much at this point. But when you're in an unknown, like, I don't know how long or how tiring this will be, like, will I get my second, third, fourth wind? What it'll be like. How do you manage how you exert yourself, or how you stay grounded in an unknown situation like that?
I love your comment about the word budget, because we have physical and emotional resources. I will say that as humans, we barely scratch the surface of what we're capable of. And that's part of why I continue to do what I do. I mean, I'm 52 years old and doing these big, long, huge expeditions. And in some ways to prove to myself, but also to others, the human body is capable of exceptional things. And so the budgeting, physical and emotional budgeting, part of that comes from experience of just putting myself in uncomfortable situations time and time again. And it's why I encourage people to sign up for races or sign up for events. And like, I don't want to race. I don't race. I'm not a racer. I'm not an athlete. But what a physical challenge can do, it lets us practice for life. It lets us practice resilience. It lets us practice grit. It lets us practice problem solving. And like, when the shit hits the fan, it lets us figure out how to adapt and to move forward. And we don't really get to practice for life. And I do feel like hard physical endeavors, that's our training ground. And so to answer your question, how do I budget when I'm in those situations? One, I've put myself there before and I continue to. And two, I also realize emotional stress and physical stress, the body doesn't really know the difference. And so, me getting really stressed in that cave and losing my cool, that actually wasn't really helping the situation. I was burning precious calories that I didn't need to be burning. And that's a lesson too. And I'll go back to Leadville, my fourth Leadville win. Standing on the start line, I wasn't nervous, which was not like me. My husband even like, "Are you okay? Like, you seem like insanely relaxed. Like, is something wrong?" Because normally I'd be on the start line, I'd be like, "Oh, I'm all nervous. And then it's like by the fourth time, I know the course, I know what I'm capable of, I know I've trained. If these other people around me are faster and have trained harder, like, being nervous doesn't really help." And so that's the part about controlling the controllables. So when you're in a hard situation, it's like, did you prepare physically? Hopefully you did. And if you didn't, you're there. You can't go back and be like, "Oh, I should have trained more. I should have studied more. I should have done whatever." It's really, how do you adapt in the moment? And what's really cool, you hear these stories all the time of like, a woman lifting a car off her baby, or like someone in the wild being attacked by a mountain lion and they fend off the mountain lion. Intuitively, as humans, one, we're physically stronger than we know, and intuitively we know what to do. And often it's I believe we have three intellectual centers in our body. We have our mind, our heart, and our gut. Most of the time where I fumble, or a lot of people fumble, is when the mind takes over and we're like, but what about this and what about that? And we overanalyze something, when if you just go with your gut and your heart in those really difficult moments, we know intuitively what to do. And so in that cave, it's like, yeah, I was budgeting, I was planning, I'm thinking about it. I probably got a little too emotionally stressed out of like, what if our lights run out? What if this happens? Instead of just, let's keep moving. And if our lights run out, this is what we'll do. And if this is, we're in here all night, okay, this is what we'll do. So yeah, that was a long way of answering about budgeting, but I also think we underestimate ourselves, and that's why everybody should go sign up for something long, go do some long hike in the woods, go do a long paddle or a run. And that might be an hour for you, or that might be a day, or that might be a 10-day, exploration. But all those lessons and teachings are waiting for us out in nature if we just move around in there. It's such a great master's degree in how to manage life.
You brought up the mountain lion fighting story. I had a guest on the show who was in a 2-day long battle with a mountain lion who wanted, I think, to eat him. And because he was I think he had a sprained ankle, and it had been tracking him in the wilderness. And he ended up getting, two logs and essentially just like beating back this mountain lion. He was awake for 2 days straight, just like fending off this mountain lion. I was like, that's pretty intense.
So that person probably isn't going to get very stressed about anything else, coming their way if they've beaten off a mountain lion for 2 days straight.
Well, he this happens to be the world's most traveled man, and he said it's actually really easy. Like when bandits in the Central African republics are trying to hold you up, you just treat them like a bear or a mountain lion, and you just intimidate them with your eyes, and they back off. And I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that's like. We've all been there, right?
Oh my gosh, thankfully I've never been there, but I love that point of like, we are all animals, we are all, so even, anyone who has a dog knows that, like, if you stare at your dog the wrong way, they get uncomfortable. And so that's a really interesting concept, that you can use what we consider human or animal interactions, but they work both ways, humans for both species.
Yeah. Speaking of tight spots, I was watching the maybe it was your second Iditarod bike up there, and you, like, on the very first day you were in a snowstorm and got off course. And then you ended up meeting up with your husband.
Yeah, that's right.
So obviously he was up there doing the event, but doesn't usually do the events with you? Or...
sometimes. My husband's a great cyclist, and so he was on Blood Road with me as crew, and he rode with me some of the days when Yuan wasn't able, and we've raced together as teammates. He's also a 24-hour solo world champion, so he's a great athlete. And we had both gone. I had gone to the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is the human-powered version of the historical dog sled race, doing that on bike. And after my first year, I just said, you need to come to Alaska. You need to ride this and see it. It's so magical, so beautiful. So I talked him into it.
Oh, cool. And
then that second year we did end up pairing up because I'd made a mistake. And it ended up being a really beautiful journey with him. And I'm glad we found each other, because it was some of the worst conditions in the history of the event, and literally like thigh deep snow, and like lifting our bikes, moving one step at a time. And I was so grateful really to have an emotional partner in that experience to kind of survive those conditions that year.
I've been lost in a snowstorm in Montana with my partner, and it's, man, deep snow and like falling into deep snow and losing your way. And we like, we're out in the night also, and it's like, it can be pretty intense, and then it was a point in our relationship when we were like, wow, we made it through, and we were like so collaborative, and we did it. We weren't nipping at each other, and like, that's a great sign.
I hear you. I mean, yeah, if you can survive that with a partner, you can get through anything. And I felt that. I mean, my husband and I have been together a long time, but that, which is just a couple of years ago, that experience on the Iditarod Trail really solidified our relationship, and definitely was the hardest thing we've done together. So I do feel like we could tackle anything, and yeah, we collaborated well. And so it's a nice feeling to. People are like, you ride with your husband? I'm like, yeah, he's the best teammate ever. And he's really calm. Like, he's just very grounding, which is pretty great in a teammate. And he's very matter of fact. And I mean, there was one night, it was 50-mile-an-hour winds. We're pushing our bikes. It was like minus 40 degrees with 50-mile-an-hour winds. So I don't even know what that would calculate to, but literally, like, we couldn't stop because we would freeze. And so we're head down, pushing our bikes into the wind. And, you couldn't unzip a jacket. We didn't eat for about 8 hours because you couldn't take anything, your face mask down or anything. And so that was intense. And I just remember, like, I needed to put my down over boots on, and he was just like, put them on right now. I'm like, I can't do it. And he's like, put the over boots on. And like, That was it. And it's like, okay, I have to do this. I have to do this right now. So yeah, he's very matter of fact, very stable, but also very reassuring for me. I know if I'm with him, like, he's solid.
That's fantastic. Um, did you guys meet doing cycling?
We did meet on a bike ride. Yeah.
Cool. You mentioned okay. Actually, I want to ask you about, because you talked about distilling things from the trail to bring them back, and so you're not only racing in the Iditarod, but you've got your cameras and you're trying to make a little short film. What's your approach? So I've done this in my travels where it's like, okay, here's a really cool spot. This would be an amazing Instagram post, or I think this would be sort of a really interesting setup. But then would it disrupt my experience of being there, or like you got to put the explorer hat aside and then take the storyteller hat and put it on? How do you manage trying to be distilling things from the trail to bring back and also competing in the same moment?
I try not to separate them. I mean, the camera's on and I'll push the button, and sometimes I just ramble and I'm talking, and it's almost like a voice journal. And Blood Road was the same way. I was very unaware of the film crew because I was so focused on my mission and what I wanted out of the spirit experience. And you're exactly right. I didn't want to taint the experience by being like, oh, how's my hair look? Or did I say the right thing? And so I've never separated them, and really just try to let people in and authentically. And if that comes across, that's great. But no, I'm not an actor. I'm not a filmmaker. And so really, I do just try to push the button. And there's plenty of times, in the Iditarod Trail, for example, it can take the short one, the 350-mile, it's taken me 3 days, and it's taken me 8 days, depending on conditions. So in 8 days, or even in 3 days, you may get, we may make a 20-minute little video about it, but obviously there's a lot of stuff happening in 8 days that's not recorded. And oftentimes, that story about 50-mile-an-hour winds in the dark with a headwind, I'm not pushing the camera button in that moment. I can't, because it is survival. And so, yeah, it's a balance, and I don't record. Half of it's not recorded, and it's just recorded in my journals or maybe my stories. And that's how maybe I would bring back something that I wasn't able to get on film or Instagram or whatever, but I can bring that back in the written word and the thoughts. But no, I don't think about making a film. I just push the button until the batteries run out and do my best and see what comes from it.
Okay, cool. So for anybody listening, no pressure. You can make something good, even just turn the camera on.
Yeah.
You mentioned this year 2015 and the special tree that you encountered. Is that the one on the Ho Chi Minh Trail where you left the letter for your dad? Is that what you're?
Yeah, that tree. And I'd love to hear about your tree too. But yeah, the tree, the crash coordinates. So the journey down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, from, we had the crash coordinates of my dad's crash site, and we had the military documents of the excavations that had happened multiple over the years. They didn't really find my dad's remains or verify that he did in fact die there. They didn't identify any remains until 2007. And so, he crashed in 1972. So, yeah, there's a long time really not knowing what happened, but we had those crash coordinates and the verification. They found 2 teeth. And so that's where I was just going to that place to see what would happen and what was there. And what I found was pretty magical. We met the village chief whose father had actually buried my father. So after the crash, the story that Mr. Air told me through a translator, he's the Lao village chief now in the village of Taoy. He sat and told me the story and said that, there was a plane that was shut down. They waited till the bombing stopped. 2 Lao villagers, his father, went to see if there were survivors. They found 2 American bodies, and they buried those bodies there with respect. They went and buried them under this beautiful tree. And he told me the story. He took me to the tree. He actually, with his machete going into the jungle, he picked around in the dirt and still picked up pieces of the plane, remnants of the crash that were just really proof that, yes, this is the place. My dad is really here. And then showed me the tree where his father buried my father. And it's this old, beautiful tree. And we hadn't seen any other trees like it in the jungle. It was very old and twisted and really cool looking tree. And it had a big open hole in it, just kind of waiting to receive. And so I had written a letter and wrote it to my dad and put it in the tree. I put his MIA bracelet and a few trinkets and a photo, and every time I've gone back, I've put in more items in the tree, and every time I go back, the items are gone the next time. I don't know where they go, or it doesn't matter to me, I brought a letter from my sister the second time I went, and and so this tree is really it's where I feel my dad and where his spirit is. And Mr. Air, the village chief, he promised me this tree, he'd never cut it down, and that he would tell his children not to cut it down. And it's really become a representation of my family tree and my extended family, of the mountain bike people that I bring there to experience it. And we all sit under the tree and talk to our family and feel our family. And there's something, being in a place is very powerful. And, my dad, technically, his 2 teeth are buried in Arlington, and there was a service, and all that. And I didn't ever really feel connected to him there because I didn't feel like he was there. I mean, it was a beautiful ceremony with the Air Force, and but I feel him at that tree in Laos on those crash coordinates. And so, the tree has sort of become, I guess in some ways that's where I found partially my enlightenment and understanding. It's my little Bodhi tree of, for anyone who sort of follows a bit of the Buddhist religion. And trees have become really important to me now. But I'm not alone. I mean, you've had a tree experience. There's trees all through poetry and writing. And what I really love about it is the grounding in the roots of the earth. And then also the leaves reaching out to the world. And I think about, when you ask me, what is my service to other people? It's grounding myself and in my ride, my cycling and what I do in my expeditions, but then letting the leaves of the tree grow and bring that out to the rest of the world too. And your tree, where is your tree?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about it. It's in the jungles of Bali. It's like right in the heart of it's a volcanic island, and it's right in the volcanic uplands, and it's 1,000 years old. It's really big and old, and there's 3 trunks that come together, and it's very much like the tree in the movie Avatar. You feel like a whole village could live in this tree. And I had been to it without having a magical experience a couple of times, but then I think the 3rd time that I went, I had sort of a very potent, what I would call an astral projection experience, where the tree transported my consciousness to China, partway across the world, and showed me visions and shared emotions with me, and showed me like so much of what I now understand through science is possible, like communication between people and plants, and how your consciousness can be projected. But it just really was like an electrical shock, an emotional shock of an experience, sitting with this tree. And I've been back a couple of times as well. I took my family there, And yeah, I have a lot of respect, for something that old, and something that can, there's, to have the power, right, to take someone else on a journey like that.
Yeah.
Like the tree, I believe the tree had an intent to show me something, to give me a lesson,
Yeah.
to guide me in a way. And understanding that a tree can have that type of power and consciousness to influence my life, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had the same experience. My dad was there. We were there together. We're there together every time that I go to the tree in Laos. And, when I got to the tree, and this is going back to something we originally talked about, is like intense athlete, always searching, always seeking, like going to the next thing. And when I got to the tree there, it was like I could stop for the first time in my life, and I could stop searching. And because I had found my dad, I'd found myself, I'd found like that it's okay to stop and sit under a tree and write a letter to someone. And so, that's the message he wanted me to receive, is that I could slow down, and that I had more gifts to give through my cycling than podiums or any other awards or things like that. And I will say it was really quite amazing, because, and you can see it in the film, when we were at the tree, this little orange butterfly was around me the whole time. And we had not seen one butterfly in Laos the entire trip. And you see it's buzzing around, it's following, it's landing on me. And then every day for like the rest of the trip, there were butterflies all over the place, landing all over my backpack and hitting me in the face. And I was just like, okay, I get the message. I hear you. I got it. And now I see, butterflies will show up. A butterfly showed up when I was riding up and down Mount Kilimanjaro a couple of years later. There was a butterfly that landed right next to me. And our African guide, who's climbed Kilimanjaro 50 times, he just said, there's no butterflies up here. They don't exist here. I've never seen a butterfly here. And I'm like, yeah, hi, Dad. So I definitely feel you that our consciousness can be transported and moved in other places. And yeah, the tree, I'd love to see your tree sometime and maybe take you to mine.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah. I saw something in the film, and it was when you were lighting a candle and that sort of rocky waterfally place the day before. And I went back and I watched it 3 times, and I couldn't see it again. But I saw when you lit the candle, I was like, your dad showed up right then. And I saw it in the background, and I replayed it 3 or 4 times, and I was like, I couldn't see it again, but I saw it the first time. Wow. And it was like, I don't know, it was just, like a ghost. But I was like, holy shit. Yeah, it was really, really weird. But I didn't know if you knew that or had seen something.
No,
like
but now I'm going to go back and watch. And we were sitting on that rock, and we all were telling stories about our own fathers. So my husband, Greg, talked about his father. Huen talked about her father. My mechanic, Jason, talked about his father. And it was a really special moment of sharing our elders and what they give us and teach us. And but I will watch that segment. But it was really, really special to sit there again and just reflect and talk about our dads. It was a cool moment, and I love that you saw that.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do it again, but or if it's even like in the film itself. Like sometimes I feel like I perceive additional layers of reality. So,
well, things are not two-dimensional. And I was talking to someone about basically quantum computing, and how they were explaining, typical computing is, linear, ones and zeros, but that quantum computing is you're trying to look at everything through all these other layers. And I do believe that we feel and see more in a quantum way like that. But yet we're not used to paying attention to it. We read left to right, we look at things a little bit in black and white or two dimension. And I think what you're touching on is that we're getting communication in many other dimensions, but we haven't heard it or haven't been listening to it.
Yeah, it's almost like when kids don't know a language yet, and they're still communicating, it's like we have trained ourselves to perceive the world in such a, like, everyone has trained us to see the world in this way that we all agree we're seeing things together. There's this quote that I heard the other day. It was like, someone was asking, like, is that real? And it's like, well, if you and I agree right now that this thing is real, then it will be real.
All right. I love that.
So Kilimanjaro, can you really ride to the top of Kilimanjaro?
Most of the way. Yeah. You got it. The last day, it's real rocky. And so we loaded and put our bikes on our shoulders and carried them. But yeah, you can ride most of the way up and most of the way down, and it's really fun.
I can imagine everyone that hikes up would be wishing that they had a bike to go back down.
On the way down, like on the way up, people were like, you're crazy. And then on the way down, all the people walking were like, oh, that looks cool. You're like, see ya. Like, we were down in half a day. It takes 4 days to get up, and then we're down that afternoon. It was really fun descent.
It's like, I think in the Banff Film Festival a few years back, there was the guy who paraglided off of Everest. Mm-hmm. And he did, I don't know if you saw this, he paraglided all the way to the Ganges and then like landed in a kayak and then kayaked out to the Indian Ocean.
Nice.
So it was kind of like a duathlon, but I always thought, yeah, like just jump off the peak and just like fly down. That's the way to go.
So much better. Yeah. Take the elevator down.
Gosh, we've talked about a lot of really fun stuff. Is there some things that I haven't asked you about yet that you I think you were talking about before? You're talking about the evolution of your business. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Yeah. I mean, I never planned to be a professional athlete. I just liked being outside. And I have a business and marketing degree. So that was able to morph into my career now. But I used to manage and run rock climbing gyms in California. I was part of that and lived out of my car for a while and did a bunch of adventure racing. And really where that's evolved to is still doing sport and doing big expeditions. But also I have an event that I host every year called Rebecca's Private Idaho. And that's a big gravel ride that is in Idaho, but we also have an online training program with my coach and a remote RPI remote aspect, so people can ride from wherever they are. And so I've been finding ways to, like I said, with the mission statement, it's to help people move in the outdoors and sort of feel the kind of journey that you can go on with just a physical bike ride. And so, yeah, Private Idaho is a big part of the platform, and the Be Good Foundation and storytelling. Blood Road really showed me the power of telling a story and how people resonate with it. And the story is not about me. The story is about family and forgiveness and, going on a journey. So, that evolution now is to tell more stories. And so upcoming expedition, I have a couple that I'm pretty excited about. One is in Iceland. I'll be going with a couple of friends to traverse the southern coast of Iceland, which is pretty rugged, pretty remote. It'll be all on sand, so we'll have to ride fat tire bikes. And there's something like 38 fast flowing river crossings. So we'll be taking pack rafts, which are these teeny little boats that 4 or 5 pounds. And so they'll be strapped on the bike. Everything we need will be on the bike, self-supported. So yeah, we'll be moving along, blowing up the boat, putting the bike on top of it, similar to the journey in Blood Road, but by going across the river, and then load it all back up again and continue on our way. So these big, bike expeditions that are self-support, the bike is loaded with probably 60 pounds, loaded with sleeping equipment, navigational equipment, headlamps, food, everything. So that'll be a big journey this July that I'll be taking. And then next year for the Iditarod, this has been sort of a multi-year plan. I've done the short version every year, which is 350 miles. So the plan is with a really good friend of mine and sort of the godfather of winter bike expeditions is to do the full 1,000-mile full length of the Iditarod Trail. And that will be with my friend Jay Peterberry, and try to document and tell the story of the villages and the dogs and moving through that kind of terrain self-supported. And that'll be 3 weeks to a month on the trail, self-supported. So that will be the biggest expedition of my life. Month? What's that?
1,000 miles will be a month.
Yeah. On a fat bike, it's a month. It takes the dogs, 7 or 8 days, but they're moving a lot faster. So yeah, depending on conditions, it'll take 3 weeks to a month on the trail on a bike. Are
people, some cyclists are doing this already, or this 1,000-mile route?
Yeah, this event, the Iditarod Trail Invitational, it's been going on for, I think they just had their 20-year anniversary. So yeah, people have been doing the human-powered version of the Iditarod for a while, on bike, on ski, on foot. But I've never done the 1,000-mile version. So it'll be Jay's 10th time or something, but my first time.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, we'll get to do that together.
Fat bikes really haven't been around for that long.
They haven't. It's kind of a cool sort of evolution of bikes. People have been exploring bikes for forever. But they're starting to see, on snow, if you make the tires 5 inches wide, there's flotation and all the equipment is developing. So there's, ways to carry stuff on your bike and panniers and frame bags. And so it's cool to see the evolution of the equipment that just allows you to go and survive in nature. We're not polar bears. We don't have that warm coat already, and so humans are developing the tools to be able to be out there, whether it's camping equipment or bike equipment or whatever.
Yeah, I remember I was doing a 24-hour Nordic race in West Yellowstone, and then there was all of a sudden these fat bikers, and I was like, oh, I've never seen this. And that was,
West Yellowstone is near us, and that's a really good network. It's an awesome network for riding a bike, and that's where Jay actually puts on some winter events, and that's how I got into winter cycling. Was he was sort of the instigator, a good friend of mine, and he's like, you should do this winter stuff. I'm like, no, it's too cold, I can't do it, I don't want to do it.
You were a skier also, right?
Yeah, I cross country ski, backcountry ski, kind of do a bit of all of it, but I was really afraid of the cold and staying out, sleeping in minus 40 degree weather, and keeping your feet warm and keep your hands warm. So this sort of last 5 years of doing winter bike expeditions has been a new journey for me. It's kind of a new evolution, and Jay is the instigator of all of that. So it makes sense that we'll go do the Iditarod together next March.
Oh, cool. I'd love to, I haven't been up in, you're in Sun Valley or Ketchum. Is it the same?
Yeah. It's the same place. Yeah.
My college buddies and I, we have almost every year we do a ski trip. We've been probably 13 or 14 different ski mountains all around North America, but we haven't been to Sun Valley yet. So
cool. Well, I hope you'll come visit. I'll take you out on a fat bike if you're there in the winter.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. That would be awesome. I was up in Bozeman for a few years in grad school, studying in Yellowstone for a while. So love that.
It's very similar. Yeah, very similar terrain. Idaho, Montana. Yeah.
Here's another just random question from my list of things to ask you. Have you ever really surprised yourself or impressed yourself with a physical feat where you're like, oh damn, I'm pretty amazing?
Yes. And I mean, it's sort of weird to say of like, yeah, that was friggin' awesome. Um, Two things I will say when I was doing adventure racing, and for those who don't know Eco Challenge or that sport, it's multi-day team sports where you're kayaking, you're running, you're navigating, you're biking, you're riding horses sometimes, and really truly were expeditions, and the teams are co-ed. And so typically I was the lone female on a team of three big strong burly guys, and that was a really great education for me to see, over then the races were 7 to 10 days, very little sleep deprivation, and you're carrying everything with you. And you really start to see the team dynamics when people are cold and hungry and lost and super duper tired. And there were definitely multiple times where, usually about after day 3, where the first couple of days I'm hanging on for dear life, not able to keep up, thinking I suck, I'm terrible, I'm too weak, I can't do this. And then the switch would flip about day 3, where I didn't feel like I was going any faster, but all of a sudden I could keep up. And there were times where I would carry the backpack for, one time in particular, one of the strongest men I've ever raced with, John Jacoby's Australian guy, and he's 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, just like solid muscle. And he was spent and he was done. And I carried his backpack, this big, huge guy, my backpack, his backpack, and he's a towering tree trunk next to me. And that was really a moment where I was like, okay, we all can offer, we're all strong at some point, we're all weak at some point, but to carry John's backpack, and that was a race in Vietnam. And yeah, I carried his backpack for a while, and that happened multiple times where I would be given proof. And like you said, people around us are a mirror to ourselves. And had I not been with 4 people or 3 other people, I might have felt like, oh, I'm not moving fast enough, I'm not doing a good job. But I have this direct comparison with my teammates of like, oh, right now I'm the strong one. Okay, I can contribute right now. And then when I need help, they'll contribute. And so that happened multiple times over and over again, of getting a reflection of like, wow, I'm the strongest one in this moment. Not that I was the whole time, but a comparison of like, okay, I can pick up the slack. And that's a really good feeling of being able to give and help. And most of us, we're not great at asking for help, but we always want to give it. It makes us feel really good to be like, I got it. I can push that bike. I can do this thing. I will say, in response to your question, the proudest expedition I've ever done in my life was last year's Iditarod Trail Invitational. And that's not the one that it was my 3rd one, doing the 350, and with the long-term goal of doing the 1,000-mile. And so my husband went back again, and we elected to do the ride fully unsupported. So what that meant is we didn't go into any of the lodges for water or to sleep. We basically didn't go inside a building for 7 days. And so we slept outside, we built fires, we melted snow for our water. There were a couple lodges along the way where you can buy food or at least get warm. And so we didn't do that. We elected to do it fully self-supported. And my thought was, hey, if I can't do this, then I have no business doing the 1,000-mile version if I can't survive on the trail without shelter. And so we did it. We're the only 2 people to complete the course that year in that style. And so like literally, like there'll be like a small little cabin and they're like making bratwurst, and that's a checkpoint and everyone's going inside and eating bratwurst, and we're literally camped like next to it, like smelling bratwurst and just being like, no, we're going to just make our dehydrated meal and go to the river and get some water and boil water. And so it was a lot more work. But I finished 1st female, 6th overall. And again, we're the only people to do it fully self-supported. And it might not sound like a big deal, but I'll refer back to fact that I'm not very good in cold. I've always been afraid of it. I have poor circulation. I have lung issues. And so for me to be able to do that is something I never thought I would be able to do. And at 52, to do the best expedition of my life that I was the most proud of, the most prepared for, yeah, that felt pretty good. So that's part of the building blocks of doing the 1,000-mile next year, and continuing my training and preparation for that. But I'm pretty proud of that one.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah,
Jay,
congrats.
like he was out there that year with a young mentor, a young kid he was mentoring, and they had planned to do it unsupported as well, and they caved in and went inside and got the bratwurst. And even Jay, like my mentor, was like, "Wow, that was a really awesome achievement." So
I can smell the bratwurst right now.
I know. That was very cruel to like be able to smell the barbecue grill going and just like, oh.
There's a story that I heard sometime, might have been from Stephen Kotler talking about a surfer. But it's so how do you prepare for 1,000-mile self-supported race? Well, like what's the next closest thing? Okay, well, the 350-mile self-supported race. And this guy was talking about the biggest, Laird Hamilton, when he surfed that 70-foot wave, and it was the biggest wave ever surfed, but he had actually surfed a 60-foot wave the day before. And so the difference for him between the 60-foot wave and the 70-foot wave was a couple percentage points
That's
harder.
Right.
And it's like, we all do, when I go to work and, you know, like maybe one show to the next, I'll be, you know, 1% better in some way. But that's like, you know, a 70-foot wave is just 1% better. He's just going to work. And it's like, for you, you know, 1,000 miles self-supported in a month in the snowy north is like, it's just a little bit harder.
And that's what I'm like. And Stephen Kotler, I love his work, the Flow Research Collective. And he does talk about, you need high, hard goals. You need this impossible goal, but you can't tackle that by looking at that goal. You tackle that in small pieces and small increments. And you're exactly right. And that's why, you know, it is the long game. It is why I signed up for this. You know, I'm doing really Iceland this summer will be great preparation for Alaska next March, and putting myself in situations that are incrementally harder and increase durability, and doing a lot of weightlifting now because I need to just be really strong to move my bike and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Steven's a great guy to talk to. He's so fun.
I hadn't had him on the show yet, but he'll be on at some point, I think.
Nice.
I'm taking this year off racing, I think, at least for a little bit, and rebalancing in the gym and lifting weights. I put on 15 pounds of muscle so far this year, and it's like, it feels so amazing to be capable and just like carry my 2 kids, you know, one in each arm, and like
no. And my coach, my former coach, Dean Golich, who runs the high performance athlete performance center for Red Bull in Austria and the US globally, he used to always say, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And it's like the feeling of, even if somebody's like, oh, I don't have a race on the books or whatever, but just training for life and continually that feeling of feeling strong, it feels so good. And and partially we need to sign up for races to stay accountable. But for anyone listening, go do a bunch of push-ups and pull-ups, because it feels amazing to just feel strong, and like to need to go lift your luggage and you're like, I got that. It's a really rewarding feeling.
And I have to, staying ready. Like my dad is, how old is he? 68. And he's already ridden probably 10 times more than I have this year. And It's like, well, I have to be ready at least so I can finish a ride with my dad.
Right. Totally. Maybe you both need to come to Idaho for Private Idaho. Would love to host you.
That would be fun. When is Private Idaho?
It's the first weekend of September in Idaho. It'd be really fun.
It's a nice time of year up there.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds intriguing. I'm always up for an adventure. I may be riding across Bhutan this October.
Very
Should be a
cool.
first
So yeah,
expedition
this would
in a
be
while.
an incremental training
Oh, there you
for
go.
you to get to Bhutan.
Now you're selling it. Okay. This seems like a fun place to wrap. We've talked about your foundation and your event, and you've got your Red Bull hat on, and I know you make some films with them. What would you like to direct people's attention towards to find out more about you?
Yeah, I mean, everything you can find me at RebeccaRusch.com, RUSCH, or the Be Good Foundation or Private Idaho. They're all wrapped into one little bundle. But mostly I'd love to leave people with the words, if you're to be good. It's pretty quite simple, and it's what your mission seems like it is, that we're all on this journey of evolution of performance and connecting with each other. So I really appreciate you reaching out and getting the chance to talk. And I do hope we'll get to ride together in Idaho, and maybe we'll get to ride to a tree in a special place one of these days. That would be cool.
I would love that. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been great, great chatting with you. Great to meet you.
Super fun. Thank you. What a good conversation.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks so much for listening to the whole episode. You made it all the way to the end. Congratulations. And I'm going to remind you again to join us for the no-cost Quantum Entrepreneurship Training, April 19th, 20th, and 21st. Again, this is a training that I put together, a high-level business training for coaches, healers, and spiritual entrepreneurs. You can sign up at DerekLaudermilk.com or find them in the show notes. And it's a free training. We're doing it live in person, so you're going to want to be there on each of the days. You'll have a chance to ask personal questions, maybe even get some coaching on your specific business. This is something that I would probably normally charge $1,000 for or more to attend the event, but I'm doing it for free as a service to my audience, to my listeners, and to help spiritual entrepreneurs. So save the dates, mark your calendars, and hope to see you there.